All right, lastly, let's take a look at what happened in Richmond last night.
Oh, jeez.
This, who was the person who, what was the name of the person who shot this footage, Brendan? Do we know?
The Twitter user, not LeVar. That's all they're giving in terms of identification.
Okay, not LeVar. He gave permission to folks to use this. This is a little bit disturbing, folks. It goes from a peaceful protest to what looks like basically an urban battlefield in moments. They don't want them shooting, and that's why they put those lights in them. Is this the first clip? I thought that was 3 minutes. Oh, here we go. You can see that they're just firing these. I don't know if those are gas canisters.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's completely twisted now that if you have a bullet that is covered in rubber, it is just like you're just allowed to fire on these crowds. I mean, that is so twisted. It's unbelievable.
And this is not, I mean, the other thing about the media over the last few weeks, there was just too much to take in. And now they're just back to COVID, which is obviously a crisis. So this type of story isn't being covered now.
Yeah,
because we're just numb to it.
I mean, it really is nuts. And there's, I saw the other night a thread on Twitter of a young man who had basically lost sight in his eye. We've seen multiple occasions of that because they've been fired upon. Yeah. Guy who was apparently at a protest with his mom, and it's just you think back to Kent State,
yes,
before who died there, and how much that became a rallying cry. Right. You've got the versions of this going on every night. The only difference is the bullets are covered with rubber, and so all that happens is people lose their eyesight. I mean, some people die. We've had some deaths associated with this, but people lose their eyesight. People become severely injured. And
brain damage.
It's just, well, that's what you get for protesting.
I was thinking back to Standing Rock, just watching that, which, when I was at Standing Rock, I remember being so shocked that these stories were not being put out there. And it was very similar. It was like, obviously this is happening everywhere, but there's something very, very similar about that visual right there, about how they were just moving forward no matter what. Moving forward, just shooting, no warning. And the smoke, and also feeling like it was just lost, like the store, no one was covering it. And eventually, yes, but it took a very long time before Standing Rock was covered. And even then, it was like more about the organizing rather than the violence that the police state was inflicting on people.
The only thing I can hope is that there's enough local coverage in places like this where, the people, I don't know, but it's the one thing you could hope. Meanwhile, so on one hand, you have these violent police assaults on protesters, and very little coverage of this going on and telling these stories at this point. However, if you're a police department and you're convinced that you've been poisoned at Shake Shack by people putting bleach in your milkshake, very easy to get coverage. In fact, you could practically write the copy and just distribute it, apparently, to news outlets. Here's a clip edited together by a guy named Timothy Burke at Bubba Prague on Twitter of that very thing. This is ABC, NBC. Well, you'll see. Fox News.
Bleach reportedly dumped in their drinks as anti-police sentiment hits a boiling point. Police in New York say 3 officers were intentionally poisoned by workers at a Shake Shack in Manhattan.
3 New York police officers are in the hospital tonight after drinking milkshakes believed to have been poisoned with bleach.
And it appears bleach was poured into their milkshakes.
Police say 3 officers were poisoned by milkshakes at Shake Shack restaurant.
3 New York City police officers say they were poisoned at a Manhattan Shake Shack.
3 officers were intentionally poisoned by workers at a restaurant.
Officials say a foreign substance was placed in their drinks at a Shake Shack in Lower Manhattan.
Shake Shack employee poisoned 3 officers by pouring bleach into their milkshakes.
Intentionally poisoned at a Shake Shack.
And it believes this was intentional.
Intentionally poisoned.
Intentionally poisoned by 1 or more workers at the Shake Shack.
The officers were intentionally poisoned.
The officers were intentionally poisoned.
Intentionally poisoned.
People feel emboldened to put chemicals into a police officer's food.
Unbelievable.
There you have it. Absolutely zero evidence that any of that happened. And of course, a day or two later, the police quietly announced, no charges because it didn't happen. I mean, maybe they got sick. Maybe. I don't know.
So do you think this was something like maybe a couple of police officers actually, because the fact that the police force came forward and said it didn't happen means I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, that I don't think it came from the top. I think maybe there was potentially a couple of officers who thought they got sick and were poisoned and went there and they didn't investigate, and then it turns out it wasn't true and they had to cover them for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think the story here is just that all it takes is a police to sort of drop any type of theory out there, and it immediately gets reported as if it's absolutely true. Whereas every other incident that happens, requires strict scrutiny. But it also just goes to show that, look, if these guys somebody came up with the idea,
right,
that they got poisoned intentionally, and they said it. And so if these guys can come up with that idea and say that,
right,
something that is so easily disprovable, what else are they doing when they agree that, we need to hold the line?
That's what I'm saying.
A glimpse into it.
That's what I'm saying. So if it came from an officer and they immediately, instead of questioning, or maybe it wasn't from an officer, they act as a unit. They protect each other as a fraternity, and then it has devastating consequences as we see on a daily basis. So, I mean, how do you listen? Pat Lynch was there in that video saying it.
Yeah.
He is toxic.
Yep. Pretty amazing stuff. All right, let's take